Chapter 2. Remember to stretch. A heavy body moved off hers. "Are you okay?" the strange blonde man asked, offering his hand to help her up off the ground. Vita wasn't sure if she had just been caught by surprise or was attacked. She glanced at the pavement in front of her to see the chip holder had fallen from her top. Her arms, which were slightly scraped from taking the brunt of the impact, stung. She scooped it up and tucked it back into her shirt, standing without the help of the man. He pointed down the street, but she just stared at him for a moment. "There's a runaway cart. I pushed you out of the way. I hope I didn't hurt you." He extended a hand, but she took a step back, bowed, and ran away. Bowing was a strange thing to do, but she was tired of wasting time and needed to move on. It got the point across in a way where the stranger did not follow after her. She hoped that he hadn't been responsible for pushing the cart into her, but she also wasn't in any mood to trust anyone at the moment. Her feet sped her off in no particular direction as her brain tried to catch her up. This was not how she had anticipated spending her Friday. Her fingers felt numb. She felt her mind automatically shift from narrative form to help guide her from the trauma state. It was so well practiced from childhood, she barely noticed as her mind sought to calm her down, clear her panic-stricken physical urge to run. A cart was responsible for killing her family when she was younger. She had not been included in the mess because she had literally been in the woods on a hiking trip with friends on a trip gone wrong. The tragedy had changed her life in unforeseeable ways. As a preteen, it had been incomprehensible. She had been luckier than most who got lost in the system. Her adoptive father, Faust, had worked to help her with most of her traumas and process them in somewhat mindful ways. He had worked for the government in his past, retired honorably, and started working on a rescue committee to pass time. The concern he fostered for her well-being came from the fact that he found her in the forest, then had to take her back to an empty home. She was a survivor. Survivors took the time to notice things around them, or they didn't remain survivors long. She noticed that she was at the park a block away from her house and redirected her toes towards her building. In less than a minute, she was in her bedroom, grabbing the to-go bag that Faust so generously added to yearly in his paranoia. For the first time, she was honored to have it. She changed into an outfit he had gotten for her years ago and refused to change into due to looks. It was basic and would blend in with anything. A simple, long, black, organic cotton V-neck tank top over a pair of gray, organic cotton pants held up by a drawstring. These items had been picked with care and were very expensive. Free clothes were provided through the Intomo system. You could plan something out and have a fully functional outfit as soon as you wanted, making the need for cotton farming for clothing almost obsolete. The New Earth Benediction had their own cotton weavers guild, but the robes they provided were not allowed by law to be edited. Vita had seen people dragged off to rehabilitation for doing nothing more than embroidering a robe. Some traders would come from neighboring villages that had managed to rebuild, but the cultural barrier was such as visits were nominal. There were a few rich elites who grew their own specialty fibers and made some clothing, but because it was more of a novelty item, the price tag was not left for the working class. Some unnotable reporter had recently stated in a heavily featured article that the poorest of the nation behaved the most human. That statement lacked fundamentals in human nature. Humans are humans and behave as such, no matter their social standing. This misguided statement was one in a long line of misguided statements trying to sway political opinions. Vita attempted to stay out of most political conversations, but living in Aphthonia made that entirely impossible. The government provided all basic necessities for life. A person could not simply live in the city without being influenced by the politics of the state. Faust had always been sure that political topics came to the dinner table. With his non-conventional views, she always felt it was necessary to be prepared to supply a different angle from his older biases. She was currently upset and chewing on Faust's paranoia of the man coming to get her as she tied the black leather boot she felt she was about to regret not wearing in prior to today. She double-checked the stock of the backpack and tossed in some apples and cheese. When inspecting the pantry for dry foods, she found a few more basic clothing items that would not be picked up by the system and shoved them into the bag. She often ate at the pub down the street and walked home, so food storage was never something she had really considered. Vita had more wine than food and shoved a bottle into her bag. It then hit her that she should probably let Faust know that she was in danger. He had, of course, come up with an exit stratagem in case the government came after him, but she never thought that would actually happen. Vita's Tomo had been a gift from Verithy, so they could message securely. She didn't have to go far in her recent folder to find Faust in bold. She closed her eyes and mind sorting through the list of codes Faust was always going on about until she remembered the correct enough response for the issue. She rolled her eyes, then tapped out, "Roll Tide! Let's meet at our spot tonight?" She set everything down to grab and roll up her organic cotton blanket, which had been her favorite throw, and was currently wadded on the couch. Once it was tidy, she secured it with straps and metal supports, and she made sure that she had all her goods and checked her Tomo for a reply. Nothing. She grabbed her small bag of pebbles in the ancient purple bag embossed with a golden crown that her mom had gifted her and shoved it deep within her packed items. Some rocks held within had been given by the most precious, deceased, and good friends she had met. It was her version of a comfort item. She walked out and locked her door once more, the morning light now hitting her directly. She saw a man in a robe with a hood up, about the right size to be Talbot, walking menacingly in her direction. Vita tucked her phone in her zippered pants pocket and launched herself from the front steps, landing harder than she would have liked in her current out-of-shape state. It put her ahead, however, and she was up and around the corner and off towards her closest disconnected zones. There were only 2 in the city, and one was not too far off. She continued east, then turned north, and repeated the direction, moving up another block, still eastward bound. She looked behind her to see she had managed to keep the old man out of sight. Vita turned her feet left onto a different street, and she found she was grateful for one of those long dinners where she and Faust had argued about so many different political topics. The paranoia of the downtrodden was about to play to her benefit. Wisteria in every color of the rainbow lined the street. A small line of angry hummingbirds whizzed by her ear, chasing each other as if food were scarce. Vita allowed herself the amusement brought by the birds' voracity as she passed under the old archway of brightly colored plastic pieces mosaicked together to form the title Old Street. And old it was. This sector was like nowhere else in the city. The buildings, streets, and sidewalks were all bright and colorful, not just because a programmed system kept flowering shrubs. The constructions were the oldest structures in the city. They were built just after the 13-year struggle in 2027 and were crafted entirely out of condensed plastics. The dates were intoned on a large plaque on the outer part of the archway. Today, the streets were packed with people who were venturing out of their normal territory among the slickers to enjoy the superbloom. Many of them were dressed in robes of the New Earth benediction. Traditionally, one went naked under the robe to truly feel Gaia's presence. Not all would adhere to that policy, but the robes were produced by the religious zealots and handed out during the special days of the year to those who might need them for meditation. Many youths and adults from the benediction were milling about in the Luddite community and passing out the robes. She walked across the colorful plastic street and approached one of the members, an old, tall, thin blonde, who smiled and handed her a robe. "Beautiful day and wondrous greetings," she admonished, with pupils so dilated Vita wondered what kind of trip this woman was enjoying. "Isn't it just?" Vita replied, taking a moment to be amused by the woman's genuine self. The blonde then reached for something that unhooked from her belt, a small compact filled with ash. She dipped a finger in the fine gray soot, reached out to Vita's forehead, and drew a rising sun out of ash. Season's tidings. May today bring what you need. The woman grabbed her hands, kissed her on the cheek, and disappeared into the Technicolor crowd. Vita let a smile play across her face as she tossed up her hood and disappeared into the crowd. Verithy's house was about a 20-mile walk away from here. She was now off the grid and could blend in with a massive crowd that would gather around the doctor's house. He had a small, flowering hedge maze out front and an arboretum at the base of his house, which made his block a must-see. The public was not allowed in the glass room filled with trees and flowers, but they could peek in and see the scientists who were permitted among the blooms. They looked like a few ants milling about below their protective screen from the public. She tapped the glass as she slowly made her way to the front of the house with the rest of the crowd. When she finally made it to the front steps, she had to wade through people to make it to the front door. There was a fingerprint reader and a voice lock by the door that she had access to. She placed her finger on the pad and stated, "Time changes, people do not." A favorite saying of Verithy's. The door slid into the ground. A few people sitting close looked like they were going to try and enter, but she was in and shut the door before they could even make an attempt. Vita removed her hood and looked for a light switch in the dark entrance, but didn't find one. She took another step, and the whole room lit up to reveal 2 staircases leading to his living quarters, and right in front of her was a ground-level entrance with 2 heavy locking glass doors that would take her to the trees if she had that freedom. Instead, she took the left staircase and headed up. There was another locked door, and with a scan of her finger, she was in. Worry had made her breathing irregular, which developed into hiccups, making her feel ridiculous as she peeked around the corner. She could hear a television barking faintly from down the hallway. The plastic voice of an outrageous newsman polluted the house with muffled drama, and the sounds of a dripping faucet echoed from a nearby bathroom. Most of the lights were off. The few that were on cast hauntingly dimmed shadows across the floors and walls. "Hello?" she cried out, to no response. That ends Chapter 2 of Shattering Red. Thank you so much for listening. If you have enjoyed the story so far, please make sure to like, subscribe, or do whatever it is that you do to make sure that you follow what comes out next. I am going to include a link to the book below. However, please know it is available on most places that you can buy books, and the audiobook is only here on YouTube. I will also include a link to my Kofi account, just in case you don't want to necessarily buy the book, but you would be interested in donating. Thanks so much. Take care.